covered. We've covered the difference between the two mans in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. We covered what took place in the garden. Lots of clues in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to cover Genesis 4, which is going to go over the two seeds that come of the garden. And then we're going to track those two all the way throughout the scriptures as we continue on. But there's a lot to this, so there's a lot to cover. And hopefully we can just keep doing three to four chapters at a time. And if I need, I might have to have someone come up later on to read just verse by verse, because I need to try to explain certain things in between the verses. Now in this chapter, because of the 66 book canon, and I'm just going to make reference of these. Shabbat Shalom, Pops. Just going to make reference of these because we're going to be reading one passage out of here, because I want people to know not only what the 66 book canon says, but I want you guys to be able to go into other books that are, mentioned and listed here in this book. So in Joshua 10:13, it talks about when Joshua caused the sun to stand still and the moon. He says, "And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed still, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies." And then it says, "Is it not written in the book of Jasher, so the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hastened not to go down the whole day?" So there's one mention of Jasher. And then in 2 Samuel 1:18, it says, "Also he bade them teach the children of Judah to use the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher." So just bear that in mind as we go through Genesis chapter 4. I just gave you two witnesses, both in the book of Joshua and 2 Samuel, that Jasher is indeed mentioned as scripture or as a book. So a lot of other books are also mentioned. We've talked about this before as well. Approximately 18 books that are mentioned throughout the prophets that are not in the book that we currently read. And that's not to mention all of the apocryphal books that were removed from the KJV 1611. So Genesis 4:1, it says, "And Adam knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bare Cain." Now Cain's name means a vapor. "And said, I have gotten a man from the Lord." Verse 2, "And again bare his brother Abel." Abel meaning breath. Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain was a tiller of the ground. So it's giving us a distinction between the two boys. One, Abel, a keeper of sheep, and two, Cain being a tiller of the ground. And this fulfillment of him being a tiller of the ground will come to an end in this chapter. And I'm not going to go into Genesis 4:1 just because we've already spoken about this and going into the original text, stuff like that. That'll be up to the readers to do. But I want to talk about this word again, right? So this is proof that they are, in fact, twin brothers. The word again, when it says in verse 2, "And again she bare his brother Abel," it means that it was consecutively, or she was continuing on in birth. That's Strong's number H3254. And that's for the word again. And it means to continue to do a thing. Okay? And there's other words for it as well, to continue or to henceforth. But it's proof that they were twin brothers. Okay? Verse 3, "In the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto Yahweh." So I also want to stop and consider this. They were offering to the Father. Okay? And there are some things that are going to be said here that we need to consider. Verse 4, "And Abel, he also brought the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof, and Yahweh had respect unto Abel and his offering. But unto Cain and his offering he had not respect, and Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell." So we need to consider something. we see that Cain is bringing the fruit of the ground, which did not please the Father, which, in my opinion, if this had been Abel that was a tiller of the ground, had the roles been reversed and Cain was a keeper of sheep, which we know biblically, a keeper of sheep is one that leads flocks, or the children of men. But I believe that Abel, even if he would have brought the fruits of the ground, that Yahweh still would have had respect to it, because I believe that Cain didn't bring forth the best of his fruit. I believe he just brought what was, in his mind, not good for Cain. Verse 6. And Yahweh said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth, angry? And why hast thou countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shall thou not be accepted? And if thou dost not doest well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So again, he's saying, if you do well, would you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, then sin will be a desire unto you, and shall rule over you. Verse 8, And Cain talked with his brother Abel, and it came to pass when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. Now, this is a premeditated thing that's taking place. And again, we can go to other books and see that very clearly. Cain had a plan to do this. This wasn't a heat of the moment type deal. This was a premeditated thing. So I want to take a look at John 8:44. And it says this, and I want you to consider that in verse 8 where we're at, it says that Cain rose up and slew his brother Abel. So from what we've read from Genesis 1 up until this point, we see very clearly that this was where the first unaliving takes place, right? And it says in John 8:44, You are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was an unaliver from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. So, again, my question is, where did the first unaliving take place? Well, right here with Cain and Abel. Now let's look at Matthew 23, 33 through 35. And again, this is the Messiah speaking. And he's talking to the Pharisees, right? And he says, You serpents, you generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I sent unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you shall unalive and crucify, and some of them you shall scourge in your synagogues, and persecute them from city to city, that unto you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, the son of Barachias, who you slew between the temple and the altar. All right, now let's take a look at 1 John chapter 3, 10 through 13. 1 John 3, 10 through 13. And it reads, In this the children of Yahweh are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever doeth not righteousness is not of Yahweh, neither is he that loved not his brother. So just remember this verse right here, because this is very important. It says, Neither he that loveth not his brother. Verse 11, For this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. Not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore he slew him? Because his own works were evil, and his brothers were righteous. Marvel not, my brethren, if the world hates you. So you can see why when we start teaching on this particular topic, people get upset. And again, I understand why people disagree, and that's okay. But as long as people are not slandering, I have no issue with that. People can agree and choose not to believe this. That's totally fine by me. However, I've been called to preach truth throughout this entire book, which is why I'm going to cover every single book in the Bible. Not just one. We're going to cover all of them. All right, so also I want you to see, as we continue on in verse 9 and 10 in Genesis 4, we're going to see something interesting in the original manuscripts. Starting in verse 9, it says, And Yahweh said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? So we see right here, he is a liar. He knew exactly what he did to his brother, and he knew exactly where he buried his brother, right? So we just read that in 1 John. Because, again, his own works were evil. And he warned us that the love of the Father is not in a man if he doesn't love his brother, right? Verse 10. And he said, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. Now, in the original manuscripts, it says bloods, not just blood. And here's why. The reason is because in the Hebrew, it's plural, right? And this is because Satan is not just trying to unalive Abel, but all the offspring that would come or would have come through Abel. Hence the reason Abel's not mentioned in the genealogy of Adam in the next chapter. Okay, so that's pretty important. Go back and look it up for yourself. It doesn't just say blood, it says bloods. In the Hebrew, meaning it's plural, right? Verse 11, and now, he's talking to Cain, and now thou art cursed from the earth, which has opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. He's guilty for what he did. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto you her strength. Meaning, he's no longer going to be a tiller of the ground. A fugitive and a vagabond thou shalt be in the earth. Verse 13. And Cain said unto Yahweh, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Verse 14. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slayeth me. So question, who are the people that Cain is worried about unaliving him, right? Again, this is why we have to understand the sixth day creation and Adam's name, which is Strong's 120, and man, which is mentioned in Genesis 1:26. Two different creations, other nations. Am I saying all these other nations are bad? No. I'm simply saying that there were two creations, one in Genesis 1 and one in Genesis chapter 2, and now a third in Genesis chapter 3 and Genesis chapter 6. So we said we have two creations of Yahweh, Genesis 1 and 2, and now we're going to have two creations from Satan, Genesis chapter 3 and 6. Not just Satan, but the fallen. All right, it says, verse 15. And Yahweh said unto him, Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And Yahweh set a mark upon Cain, lest anyone finding him should unalive him. Now, this is the mark of the beast. This is the first time we're going to see this, but not the last. Verse 16. And Cain went out from the presence of Yahweh and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. So again, we see that Cain finds a wife in this land of Nod, which is east of Eden. Verse 17. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. Okay? Now keep track of these. This is the first child born from Cain, Enoch. And he builded a city and called the name of the city after his son, Enoch. Okay? So again, why is it that he's building a city? Because he's not able to be a farmer anymore. He's not able to till from the ground. He has no other choice but to start building cities. And from this point forward, every city that we see that's built becomes corrupt, right? Especially from this particular line, this child. Verse 18. And unto Enoch, Enoch meaning dedicated, was born with Irad, which means a flock or a wild ass or dragon. And Irad begat Methuselah, Mehujael. These sound very similar to the lineage of Adam. Mehujael means smitten of Yahweh and away from the life of Yahweh. And Mehujael begat Methusiel, not Methuselah. And this Methusiel, with a J, his death shall send. That's the name. And Methuselah begat Lamech. And Lamech means to be brought low. Verse 19, and Lamech took unto him wives. The name of one was Ada, which means a witness. And the name of the other is Zillah, which means a shadow. Okay? Now, we see that also this is not the same Lamech that is mentioned in Adam's lineage. Remember, there are 2 Enochs, and you're going to see 2 Lamechs. Okay? Verse 20, and Ada bare Jabal, and he was the father of such as dwell in tents, and such as have cattle. Verse 21, and his brother's name was Jubal, a mind that alters. That's the meaning of the name. He was the father of such that handle the harp and the organ. Again, think of the traits of how Satan was created. And then you need to think like father, like son. Verse 22, and Zillah, she also bore Tubal-Cain, which means a state of complete inner strife or self-tyranny, who was an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain, again, was a Kenite, and her name was Naamah, which means fatness. Verse 23, and Lamech said unto his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, and hearken unto my speech. I have slain a man, and to my wounding a young man to my hurt. Verse 24, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Now, what happened here? Why is Lamech in Cain's lineage saying to his wives to hear his voice and to hearken to his speech? And why is he saying that he has slain a man, and to his wounding he has slain a young man to his hurt? We can read about it in Jasher chapter 2, verse 26 through 34, and we're going to see the demise of Cain. And I want you to listen very closely. And I gave you 2 witnesses already for this book of Jasher. Starting in verse 26, and Lamech was old and advanced in years, and his eyes were dim that he could not see. And Tubal-Cain, his son, was leading him. And it was on a day that Lamech went into the field, and Tubal-Cain, his son, was with him. And whilst they were walking in the field, Cain, the son of Adam, advanced towards them, for Lamech was very old and could not see much, and Tubal-Cain, his son, was very young. And Tubal-Cain told his father to draw his bow, and with arrows he smote Cain, who was yet far off, and slew him, for he appeared unto them to be an animal. And the arrows entered Cain's body all throughout, and was a distance from them, and he fell to the ground and was unalived. And Yahweh requited Cain's evil according to his wickedness, which he had done with his brother Abel, according to the word of Yahweh, which he has spoken. And it came to pass, when Cain had died, that Lamech and Tubal went to see the animal which they had slain, and they saw, behold, Cain, their grandfather, was dead, or unalived, upon the earth. And Lamech was very grieved at having done this, and clapping his hands together, he struck his son and caused his death. And the wives of Lamech heard that Lamech had done, and they sought to unalive him. And the wives of Lamech hated him from that day, because he had slew Cain and Tubal-Cain. The wives of Lamech separated from him, and would not hearken to him in those days. And Lamech came to his wife, and his wives and pressed upon them to listen and hear about this matter. And eventually it goes on to say that his wives did forgive him. So again, that's in Jasher chapter 2, verse 26 through 34. And I'm very aware that it's saying the son of Adam when speaking of Cain. Adam was a father to Cain. He was an earthly father to Cain, right? Adam was shepherding both Cain and Abel until Abel was taken out from the face of where they were east of the Garden of Eden. Not denying that. However, the rest of this book bears witness as to who Cain belongs to. All right, picking up again, verse 25. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son and called his name Seth. Seth means to compensate. For Yahweh hath said, he hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel whom Cain slew. Verse 26. And to Seth, to him also there were born a son, and he called his name Enos, meaning mortal man. Then man began to call upon the name of Yahweh, calling on their gods. That's not, it stops at, and then men began to call on Yahweh. But here's what we need to look at. In verse 26, it says, and Seth, to him also there was born a son. He called his name Enos. And it says, and then began. We're going to look at this word began, right? It is Strong's number 42490. Okay? And when you pull up this word, it's going to show you that is by implication to wound, to dissolve, figuratively to profane. So they began to profane the name of the Father, right? Or to defile, slay, wound, sorrow, stain. But the main word that's used here, and again, this is also spoken of the first flood that comes, because it takes out the descendants of Enos because of their worship. So again, this word began it's them starting to defile or to turn against the name of the Father. Again, this is where evil is starting to pick up. And then we're going to see in Adam's lineage, Jared, which means to descend. So this is going to bring this whole story into fruition as far as the daughters of men being on the earth, being beautiful and fair, and then these angels seeing them and lusting after them. So we're going to pick up in Genesis 5. It says, and this is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that Yahweh created man, in the likeness of Yahweh made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day that they were created. So there's a difference between man and the man Adam. And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness, after his own image, and called his name Seth. Again, compensation. Verse 4, and the days of Adam after he begat Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Adam he lived were 930 years, and he died. And Seth lived 105 years and begat Enos, mortal man. Then Seth lived and begat Enos 807 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. And Enos lived 90 years and begat Canaan. This is Keanan, by the way. This is not a proper translation. Go back and look. The proper name that should be here is Keanan. It is not Canaan, and nor is it spelled like Canaan. It's a completely different spelling, which means possession. And Enos lived, and he begat Canaan 850 years, and begat sons and daughters. All the days of Enos were 905 years, and he died. And Canaan lived 70 years, and begat Mahalalel, praise of Yah. And Canaan lived and begat Mahalalel 840 years, and begat sons and daughters. all the days of Canaan, or Cainan, were 910 years, and he died. And Mahalalel lived 605 years and begat Jared. Now, Jared means to descend. So this is where the Watchers have made this pact on Mount Hermon, which we will read here in the 66th book canon. But we need to understand that in the days of Jared, Jared's name, again, meaning to descend, is building up to Genesis chapter 6. Verse 16, and Mahalalel lived and begat Jared 830 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. And Jared lived 162 years, and he begat Enoch. Again, dedicated. Second Enoch. This is not the same Enoch as the first, which was from Cain. And Jared lived and begat Enoch 800 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years, and begat Methuselah. Verse 22, and Enoch walked with Yahweh, and after he begat Methuselah 300 years, he begat sons and daughters. So at this time, Enoch was walking the earth as the first prophet, and he was teaching men the ways of the Father. Verse 23, and all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Verse 24, and Enoch walked with Yahweh, and he was not, for Yahweh took him. So let's look at Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5. Hey, Aaron, it's good to see you, brother. I've been looking down at the screen, but it's good to see you in here. All right, it says, by faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because Yahweh had translated him. For before this translation he had this testimony, that he pleased Yahweh. Okay? Now let's look at Jude, the book of Jude, verses 14 through 15. And Enoch, also the seventh from Adam, not the second of Cain, prophesied of these things, saying, behold, the Master cometh with 10,000 of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all of the ungodly among them of their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and all of their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Again, a direct quote out of the book of Enoch. All right, picking back up in verse 25. And Methuselah lived 187 years, and begat Lamech. Again, this is not Lamech, the same Lamech that was in Cain's lineage. Completely different child. And Methuselah lived and begat Lamech 702 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. Again, Methuselah, the oldest man to ever walk the earth. 960 years, almost one full day with the Father. Okay, almost 1 millennium. Verse 28, and Lamech lived 108 years and 2 years, and begat sons. And he called the name Noah, saying, this same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which Yahweh hath cursed. And Lamech lived and begat Noah 590 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. 777 years, the number of completion. Again, biblical completion. So interesting that he only lived 700 when the rest were living 900. Now we're starting to see lifespans becoming shorter. Verse 32, and Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now we're going to see something very interesting here, right? Out of all of the people that are on the earth. All right, Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. So man is already procreating, okay? Man is procreating on the earth, and there's already daughters being born unto them. Again, we need to go in and look at this word where in Genesis 6:1, men. Again, different from man in certain places when you look. You'll see that one is referring to Adam and his lineage, and the other one is referring to Genesis chapter 1 and the sixth day creation of men. Verse 2, that the sons of Yahweh, or God, the Ben Elohim, the angels, saw that the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, all of which they chose. Now, I want to look at Jude, the book of Jude, verse 6. I'll just read it, and it says, the angels, which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of that great day. Now, again, there's a lot to this. They were bound for 70 generations from the time of Noah, and they were released after that. So once they're released, meaning let free on the earth, according to other books, we would see knowledge increasing and technology advancements and the beast system being set up, all of which we're seeing right now. All right, and also keep in mind, this is the second attack on mankind by Satan. But there'll be many more to come. But this is the second attack. This is the second attempt. First, Satan went directly to Eve and tried to distort the seed that way. And then we see Yahweh had to bring about Seth, right? Now we're seeing the angels are doing the same thing that Satan was doing in Genesis chapter 3. Now we're going to cover what this is talking about. Moving on. Verse 3. And Yahweh said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So 120 years from this day forward, a great flood is coming. Verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God, the Ben Elohim, the angels, came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children unto them, and the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Now, this word here that's being used here is Nephil. Okay, it's Strong's H5303. Strong's H5303. Nephil. Again, this is speaking of a bully or a tyrant or a giant. Okay. Also, the word old there is olam. Olam is speaking of everlasting, ancient, evermore, always, without end. So these are spiritual beings, clearly, that is being spoken of. These mighty men of renown, men of old. Okay? Also, I'm going to leave that. Picking up again in verse 5. And Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man, that it was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was evil continually. So Yahweh's considered all of the men of the earth, and he's seeing that all of their thoughts are only evil continually. Verse 6, and it repenteth Yahweh that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. Verse 7, and Yahweh said, I will destroy man who I have created on the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. Now question, did he destroy all, or did Noah take some of these on the ark with him? He's going to flood the earth. He's going to reset the earth. Verse 8, but Noah found grace in the eyes of Yahweh. So who is the last man that walked with the Father? Well, it told us in the last chapter it was Enoch. Enoch walked with the Father, and the Father took Enoch, right? Verse 9, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just and perfect man in his generations, his genealogies, and Noah walked with Yahweh. Okay? So, let's see. I want you to see the word for generations here. It's in your Strong's. It's 3205. And it's pronounced Yalad. And it means a pedigree. Okay? And pedigree is a related to genetics in a chart that diagrams the inheritance or a trait or health condition through generations of a family. The pedigree particularly shows the relationship among family members, and when the information is available, it indicates which individuals have traits of interest. So there's other words that are used here, but I know that this is speaking of, the book of Genesis is speaking of generations, genealogies, begats, whose child is whose, okay? Verse 10, and Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. 11, the earth also was corrupt before the Father, and the earth was filled with violence. Well, why? Well, the Nephilim were on the earth. It just told us. The Nephil were walking the earth, and when they could no longer sustain their own selves, they turned on man, and they started to devour mankind. But it goes deeper than that, right? The giants that were on the earth in Noah's time were much bigger in size than the giants that were on the earth after the flood. Remember, it said there were giants in those days and also after. Okay? Let's see. So there's violence in the earth continually. And the earth was also corrupted because they're mixing DNA. Now, we have to think about this. The Messiah said in Matthew 24, as in the days of Noah, so also shall the return of the Son of Man be. So we have to consider everything that's taking place right now in this book that we're reading. Because by the time we get to the book of Matthew and Revelation and all those books, you're going to see very clearly that this is something that's not hidden throughout the scripture. It is clear as day for the people that are able to read it with understanding. And if you are able to read it with understanding and then you deny it, that's a huge problem. However, if there are people that just cannot see it yet, that's fine by me. Again, this is your walk. I love you regardless. My goal, however, is to prepare people for what I know is coming according to the prophecies and according to the fulfillment of those prophecies, which is the revealing or the opening, the book of Revelation. Now, verse 12. And Yahweh looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. For all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. So we got to go back to Genesis 1, okay? Everything was fine in Genesis 1. And this word for flesh, again, we need to consider that. Verse 13. And Yahweh said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence throughout them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Verse 14. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without pitch. Now, I want to look up this word pitch. Very interesting. It is Strong's number H3722, which means kafar, okay? And it is to cover or to cleanse or to anoint or to seal or to reconcile, okay? Now I want you to consider even further along, right? When Noah enters the ark, the door is sealed and shut by the Father. He sends an angel and the angel shuts the door. That was Noah being sealed. Why? Because Noah was perfect in all of his generations. He was an upright man before the Father, just like Enoch. And who was the whose father is Noah coming from? Does anybody know who Noah's daughter is? Sorry, I don't know what this is. All right. So he's making this very clear. This word for pitch, He's to pitch it within and without, right? It's a ceiling. Again, we're going to see this as we get further along, what the mark of the beast is and what the mark of the Father is. People are waiting for computer chips and a tattoo that says 666. Stop it. That's not what this book says, okay? All right, verse 18. Wait, I read verse? No, I didn't read verse 15. And this shall be the fashion which thou shalt make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, and the breadth of it shall be 50 cubits, and the height of it shall be 30 cubits. So this is 3 stories, okay? And it's about 2.5 football lengths long and about a football field wide, okay? So about 2 football fields and a football field wide. This is a big boat, big ark. Verse 17, and behold, I, even I, do bring forth a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh wherein the breath of life from under the heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. Verse 18, but with thee I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, and thy sons, and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. Verse 19, and of every living thing of all flesh, we're going to look at that word, 2 of every sort thou shalt bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee, thou shalt be male and female. Interesting that he says this word flesh, right? And again, people think there's a discrepancy because he's saying 2 of every flesh thou shalt bring in the ark. And then they say, well, why does it say 7? Well, 1 was for sacrifice. You got to keep that in mind. The 1 of every flesh is speaking about the flesh that we were speaking about in Revelation chapter 1, okay? Verse 26 and 27. The man in that book, also distinguishing from Genesis chapter 2, Adam, the man Adam. There's a difference. And again, this word for flesh is Strong's H1320, H1320, which is flesh from its freshness, by extension, the body of a person, also a euphemism, the pudenda of a man, okay? Now, the pudenda of a man, you guys can look that up, what a pudenda, or what the pudenda is referring to, but it's definitely, when he's talking about in verse 19, of every living flesh, he is speaking about mankind. He's not speaking about animals yet. He's speaking about 2 of every sort of flesh, the pudenda of a man. Okay, that word flesh makes this very clear. And this is, again, why we have to go back and look these things up. Now, let's get into the animals. Verse 20. Of the fowls after their kind, and after the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee all foods that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it up unto thee, and it shall be food for thee and food for them. Verse 22. Thus did Noah do according to all that Yahweh commanded him. So he did. Now, when we get into Genesis chapter 7, once we get through Genesis 7 and 8, things are going to get very, very interesting. I think they're already pretty interesting as it stands. But remember that everything Satan is doing on the earth is a copy of what our Father is doing, right? He wants to mimic the Messiah. So Satan, people have trouble believing that Satan was in the garden. Do you have trouble believing that Satan's going to be back here walking this earth in the flesh? Does the Bible not say that Satan will walk the earth in flesh? So if he's going to walk the earth in the flesh, right, the anti-Messiah will be here in the flesh, then why is it not possible that he came down in the flesh in Genesis chapter 3? And why are we warned in the New Testament that these angels can take the form of a man? They can eat like men can eat, just as we ate the same way that angels ate. We were given manna, which was the bread of heaven, angels' food. So again, Stop limiting the Father and putting him in a box and saying, well, this